Hi, I'm Roli Srivastava,
I'm Anuradha Nagraj.
and this is The Migration Story.
अम्मी जो सिलबट्टे पे टमाटर की चटनी बनाती है, उसकी खुशबू, उसका स्वाद तो सारे जहां में ना हो जाए। हमारी मिट्टी, हवा, रास्ते, दोस्त यार, अपनी जबान, ये सभी तो घर है हमारा। अब इस सब को छोड़ के कैसे जाएं?
कोई साइकिल लेके, कोई बोझ उठा के, लाखों लोग सड़क में देख रहा है। मैं दिल्ली में था, आप देख रहे हैं कि वो बच्चे जा रहे हैं, कोई उस पर सूटकेस में सो रहा है। All those images. Look, one of the striking things when you look back at it, वो रास्ते में कोई दुनिया नहीं जला रही थी, कोई आक्रोश नहीं था, they weren't angry. वो खामोशी से हिम्मत जुटा के एक एक कदम चल चल के चले जा रहे, ऐसा कहीं नहीं। But why?
पहचान वो नहीं है बे जो हमें पकड़ाई गई। पहचान तो वो है जो हम खुद बनाते हैं।
So I'm very happy that the story kind of the film is being watched widely, and we just hope that it generates those conversations about the question of work and workers and the conditions they live in.
I was wondering if they have seen value to this interaction with a journalist who came to their doorstep 5 years ago, returned 2 or 3 years later maybe, and now their story is on the big screen. Do they see value in their visibility now? Or do they feel it's the same? I was at the cinema last night, and in the darkness of the theatre, I was sharing the space with fellow viewers watching a film. And there was at one point in the film that we were watching, it was a really serious moment when a gentle laugh spread in the theatre. It was almost like a laugh of relief that people felt in that stress-filled moment, maybe because they sensed what the inevitable end of this film was going to be. Possibly because they had read an essay 5 years ago, or possibly they have found out about an essay that inspired a film, which has now won international accolades, has been doing the rounds of festivals, and is now India's entry to the Oscars. The film I watched last night was Homebound. It's directed by Neeraj Gheywan, and it stars Ishaan Khattar and Vishal Jethwa, and some excellent supporting actors, particularly Shalini Vatsa. The film released in India on September 26 after it has already created a wave across the world. The film is based on an article which was written by journalist-writer Basharat Peer. He wrote it for New York Times, and it was published in 2020, July 1, 2020. He worked on this story in June 2020 during the first COVID lockdown, when the world was locked indoors, and he undertook a journey to Uttar Pradesh, to a small village called Devari, to meet the family of two friends, Saiyub and Amrit. This story, titled A Friendship, a Pandemic, and a Death Beside the Highway, explored the lives of the two friends. Hi, I'm Roli Srivastava. I'm a climate journalist and founder of The Migration Story, and I'm thrilled to have journalist-writer Basharat Peer with us on this podcast. Basharat is a contributing editor at Time magazine. He has been an editor at the New York Times and Foreign Affairs. He's the author of Curfewed Night and also A Question of Order, India, Turkey, and the Return of Strongmen. This is not Basharat's first tryst with cinema. His earlier book, Curfewed Night, also led to the creation of Haider, and which I think he also wrote. In this case, in the case of Homebound, his story in the New York Times, his op-ed, was adapted to create Homebound. It looks like quite a journey you undertook, Basharat, and your story continues to have its own journey 5 years after you wrote it. Welcome to the Migration Story podcast, and I hope you can talk about your journey with this op-ed, with this trip that you undertook 5 years ago, and how it continues to play out.
Thanks for having me, Roli. It's a real pleasure. I really love the work you do at the Migration Story. It's absolutely urgent and necessary work. So आपके लिए आना पड़ा. No, I mean, stories have their own life. Look, I mean, I'm a journalist. I was working for the New York Times at that time as an editor. All our offices had been shut down, so I was working from home. At that time, I lived in Delhi. That was like 5 years ago. And, at that point, you're all following the news. I'm commissioning, editing stuff largely around COVID from all parts of the world. That's a job. And then one day you see this grainy photograph on Twitter. And, given the kind of Indian context of the pandemic, it was a pretty bleak picture at that time, with both kind of the medical emergency and the social tensions that were being whipped up. So I saw this picture and some things just affect you as a human being. And I was really moved by it. And I saw this story and I was like, okay, I can ask somebody to write it or write a piece about it. But then I was like, no, I just have to go myself. I couldn't. So I talked to my editor. It's like, okay, do you have a particular angle? I said, no, I don't have a particular angle. I just want to go and find out more about the lives of these people. I think this might be a way to not just write about two individuals or two workers who were headed home during the migration when millions of workers had to leave the cities. But it might be a way to really write about India and how India has changed and not changed. So those were kind of my motivation. Finally, I got the permission from my bosses to take a few days off work and go. I got a cab and photojournalist friend of mine, Vivek Singh, a brilliant photojournalist whom unfortunately we lost him recently to a lingering medical problem.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
And Vivek traveled with me. We went from Delhi by road. He was being very careful. We had all kinds of, face guards, masks, because, we both had various kinds of medical issues. So kind of two middle-aged friends, now a little precarious themselves, just then going to find the story of this. So the photographs, the iconic images that you can see with the story of Saiyub at his friend's grave, those are photos Vivek took. So it's special in so many ways that, it's great that it became a film and it's reaching all kinds of people, but it's also sort of bittersweet. I live with the knowledge that somebody who was instrumental in shooting the pictures of the village, of the real characters, is not with us anymore. Life takes strange turns, but those images will live.
No, very sorry to hear about Vivek. I think losing a friend and losing somebody who you have worked with closely, and particularly on a project as important as this, which will have memories for years. After watching the film, I was going through some interviews of the cast and crew of Homebound.
Right.
Neeraj Gheywan said that you and Neeraj visited the families again to talk to them. What was that like, Basharat? Because you had met them once when you first did the piece on them.
Right. For me, and it's an old habit, it's never just about I got an interview from someone and that was the end of the story. So I have always been in touch with Saiyub, Mohammed Saiyub, the friend who helped bring Amrit home and who's the lead character in the story played by Ishaan Khattar. He works in Dubai now in construction as a worker. But we keep talking. He sends me voice notes. I send him voice notes. I know the updates about his life. So I was very much in touch and I'd done my duty as a reporter. I'd written a story. I told it. But then there's a relationship you have a human being with the people you meet on the way. I mean, so you would call and say, Bhaijan, aise ho raha. So of course, I would always talk to him. Or he would check on me if I was all right, my family was all right. So, that's just the very human interface. When kind of more than a year after that story got published, I was in Bombay by sheer chance, and a friend of mine who used to be a journalist and then became a producer, Somen Mishra, told me, oh, Jai, he said, yaar, wo story hame de do, hum bana lenge. I said, look, I don't own anything. I used to work for New York Times. They own it. You guys buy the rights from them. So they talked to the New York Times, complicated process, but got the rights from them. And then Neeraj was going to direct it. And of course, you want to see, he's a brilliant, sensitive man, and you want to see the world you're trying to depict or write about in a fictional form and develop a screenplay. Because the film has its own requirements, the essay has its own requirements. What I can do in an essay, I can't do in a screenplay. And what I can do in a screenplay, I can't do in an essay. There's many things that you emphasize or leave out. That's the difference between the forms. So Neeraj and we went and, we traveled together. I was in Srinagar, I flew to Delhi, from there we went. And we met Saiyub and Amrit's father, Ram Charan, and his mom, and his friends, and we spent time in the village. So for me, it was also kind of, okay, I had some sense from talking to Amrit कि उनकी जिंदगी कहाँ पहुंची है अब तक. One of the big dreams that Amrit had is कि बहन की शादी थी उसी साल December में.
Right.
And when he died, it was like he was the sole breadwinner for this family.
True.
And the thing is that, despite all the cynicism, despite all the big policy failures in India, or despite kind of concerted efforts to whip up a certain kind of frenzy for political means, it's always a calculus of passion, as the old political scientists used to say. कुछ इंसानियत तो बची है थोड़ी. So after this story got published, there were various people who just came together. A young man, Rishabh Lalwani, reached out to me saying, "Look, मैं टेस्ट में पढ़ता था, I can do a Kickstarter." Now मुझे email करना आता है ज़्यादा, मुझे technology नहीं आती. And this young man whom I don't know from Adam, उसने पूरा वो Ghetto था या Kickstarter, one of those campaigns. He did this extraordinary campaign using a link to my story and everything. And, I also sent it to everyone I knew. We all did what we could. And we were able to raise a significant amount, which helped Amrit's family kind of survive that very brutal period. And his sister got married.
Lovely.
Saiyub said, "वो तो उसकी बाई की तरह है." So he sent me the wedding cards on WhatsApp photos. And there's this beautiful picture with Dr. Ambedkar's photo on them, the wedding cards. And that was, so I was in touch. It wasn't that I was very much connected to what was happening in their lives, but through Saiyub, because Amrit's dad, उनको बोलने में भी दिक्कत होती थी, कभी उनका नंबर चला नहीं चला, तो my main connection stayed through Saiyub, so he would be in touch regularly. तो हम गए, नीरज को मिलाया, मैंने कहा ये बनाना चाहते हैं तो वो थोड़ा मुश्किल है, अच्छा हमारे क्या पिक्चर बने, तो सबसे मिले वहाँ पे गाँव का. Neeraj ko bhi, he got you need a visceral physical sense. The house you see in the film, like we had photographs and everything. Vivek had taken photographs of the house, they were detailing. Neeraj ने फिर खुद अपनी आंखों से देखा, तो वो चीजें रिफ्लेक्ट करती हैं उसमें. जो फिल्म जैसे शूट हुई है, वो गांव वैसा ही है, वो घर वैसा है, वो लोग वैसे. तो which I was quite happy about. Look, adaptation is a very tricky business. तो आप जानते नहीं है कि कोई आपकी कहानी के साथ क्या करेगा. It's a risk in that sense. जब आप, it's like giving your child for adoption. आप किसी और को दे रहे हैं.
सही बात.
अब वो उसके साथ क्या करे, ये आपके हाथ में नहीं होता. मतलब ठीक है, वो आपको फोन करके बीच बीच में पूछते हैं कि भाई ये ठीक है, ये ठीक, बट वो काम उनका है. They're the ones doing it. They're the ones casting the actors. They're the ones shooting it. So there's always some apprehension. But eventually, when the film got made, got edited, I watched it first on a private screener. And then I called Neeraj and Somen. I said, "Ki yaar, tumne to insaaf kar diya iske saath." So they did capture it. They captured the essence of it. They did it really beautifully. I was very happy with it. I was quite moved. I literally cried when I watched the film. So I'm very happy that the story kind of the film is being watched widely, and we just hope that it generates those conversations which are much needed about the question of, work and workers and the conditions they live in, but also about the structural reasons. वो film में आप उतना emphasize नहीं कर सकते, but in the story I wrote, in the essay, one of the big questions I had is कि इतने लाखों मजदूर सड़क पे पैदल चल रहे हैं, और किसी देश में ऐसा नहीं हो रहा. मतलब मान लिया कि हमारे यहाँ बहुत लोग रहते हैं, सबसे ज्यादा आबादी, बट तब भी और भी देश हैं जो मतलब हमारी तरह, जहाँ कुछ लोग बहुत पैसे वाले हैं और बहुत सारे लोग गरीब हैं, तो ऐसे तो और भी देश हैं। बट यहीं पे ऐसा क्यों है कि इतनी तपती धूप में कोई साइकिल लेके, कोई बोझ उठा के, लाखों लोग सड़क में, देख रहा है, मैं दिल्ली में था, अब देख रहे हैं कि वो बच्चे जा रहे हैं, कोई उस पर सूटकेस पे सो रहा है, all those images. Look, one of the striking things when you look back at it, वो रास्ते में कोई दुनिया नहीं जला रही थी, कोई आक्रोश नहीं था, they weren't angry, they weren't like saying कि हमारे पास कुछ नहीं है तो हम बड़े बड़े पूंजीपतियों के मॉल और बिल्डिंगे और उनकी गाड़ियां चला दें। वो खामोशी से हिम्मत जुटा के एक एक कदम चल चल के चले जाते, ऐसा कहीं नहीं। बट व्हाई? ये बदला नहीं। When I was researching, I had to watch Muzaffar Ali's Daman. एक मेरे दोस्त हैं पॉलिटिकल साइंटिस्ट, उन्होंने जब ये पढ़ा, उन्होंने कहा यार गमन किया था। ऐसे सर तो फिर 40-50 साल से स्ट्रक्चरल प्रॉब्लम वही, हाँ, फंडामेंटल स्ट्रक्चरल प्रॉब्लम वही कि बम्बई से, गुजरात से, बेसिकली आपके कोस्टल इंडिया से और साउथ में, those are the places where your industry is concentrated. आपका सेंट्रल इंडिया और नॉर्थ इंडिया, जहां ज्यादातर आबादी है, डी इंडस्ट्रियलाइज्ड। मेरे एक दोस्त हैं डॉक्टर रथिन रॉय, इकोनॉमिस्ट हैं। I talked to him. I called Rathin around that time, and I said, "Look, I really want to understand the structural reasons." And he said, "Look, it's the industrial policy, the post-independent India. In a way, it goes. Look, it's very easy to just blame on the current government कि भाई प्राइम मिनिस्टर साहब ने डिसीजन लिया कि 4 घंटे में सब बंद हो, तो इसलिए मजदूर सड़कों पे आ गए। Yes, that's the trigger, that's the immediate cause कि उन्होंने अपने हिसाब से जो फैसला लिया उसका immediate effect ये था। But there's an underlying bigger question, which is that because जो बड़े पूंजीपति थे, all the big capitalists in India, they largely come from Western India or from the South.
Correct.
Your UP, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, parts of Rajasthan, parts of Haryana is largely deindustrialized. You could be driving for miles and you won't see the kind of industry that you see in Maharashtra, that you see in Karnataka, that you see in Tamil Nadu. When you don't have, in this large swathe of India, there's no industrialization. So people can't live on what your land offers, which is in a way the greatest tragedy in human life. कि अपना घर छोड़ के जाना पड़ता है because आप वहां पे जी नहीं सकते, आपको काम नहीं मिलता।
Correct.
And वो बदला नहीं 40 साल से, 50 साल से, 60 साल से। That's the reason these boys were on that road. That's the reason Amrit died. The lockdown was a trigger, but the bigger structure, उनके पास जमीन जो थी बहुत थोड़ी सी जमीन है, it's very little. फिर हर बाप से बेटे के बच्चों में बिकता है, बच्चों से उनके बच्चों में बिकता है, तो वहां जो बचा रहता है इनके पास, जो मैंने एक्चुअली मेजर की उनकी कितनी जमीन थी, अमृत की और सयूब, when I was reporting this, and उस पे आप जी नहीं सकते।
Correct. Yeah, I remember that. I think Saiyub's land was a third of an acre.
Honestly, I don't remember the precise numbers now, but at that time I counted it. And you're like, okay, क्या इस पे इंसान जी सकता है? That's the fundamental question. Okay, मतलब दादा की थोड़ी सी जमीन बची, वो भी सबके पास नहीं है।
Right.
तो फिर आप क्या करेंगे? मनरेगा प्रोजेक्ट, महात्मा गांधी नेशनल रूरल एम्प्लॉयमेंट गारंटी, वो जो काम मिलता है गाँव, कभी 100 दिन का, कभी 80 दिन का, कुछ उसका सहारा है, कोई मकान का कंस्ट्रक्शन है, वहां पे आप ईंट उठा रहे हैं, सीमेंट लगा रहे हैं, कोई ईंट की भट्टी में काम।
Right.
But that's a fundamental question. Look, India is also extremely rich country.
Yeah.
The largest number of billionaires in Asia, or like among the largest number of billionaires in the world. You look at these people, the kind of wealth they have. I was recently in Bombay for the film premiere. And when you go leave Srinagar after a long time and land up in South Bombay, one is dazzled by the kind of money there is. And there's insane amount of wealth in India. But it's not trickling down. You have extremely rich people. You have 5% of the population that has living standards comparable to the American or the European upper middle class. But it's an undeniable fact of this kind of inequality doesn't exist in many places in the world. So individual characters humanize these questions. तो ये दोस्तों की दोस्ती के थ्रू आप एक पावरफुल कहानी सुना सकते हैं, लेकिन जो स्ट्रक्चरल रीजंस वो you just hope that somebody thinks about them. People who actually have the power to do something about it. I mean, you and me can only talk about it, write about it, but those are the glaring questions that India is facing, and they're being ignored.
That's true.
Until recently, West Delhi's Khayala was one of India's most vibrant jeans hub. Here, in cramped sweatshops, first copy hand-stitched jeans of brands like Levi's, Zara, Diesel were sold for less than 500 rupees. This cluster of 250 factories was run almost entirely by migrants from western Uttar Pradesh. For 2 decades, denim wasn't just fashion here, it was livelihood.
फैक्ट्री भी सील हो गई हमारी, वहाँ हम काम कर रहे थे, अभी तक सील नहीं खुली है उसकी, और हमारा माल ही फंसा हुआ, हमारा सब पैसा भी उसी में बंद है, हमारा सारा सब कुछ बैग सारा उसी में बंद है। सर हम तो बहुत पिछड़ चुके हैं अब, पहले जो हमारी ज़िंदगी अच्छी चल रही थी।
Watch the video story only on themigrationstory.com.
In the essay that Basharat wrote, he said, "The photograph of Amrit and Saiyub came like a gentle rain from heaven on India's hate-filled public sphere. The gift of friendship and trust it captured filled me with a certain sadness, as it felt so rare. I felt compelled to find out more about their lives and journeys."
Nearly a week after the Indian government ordered all bus and train services to stop, stranding millions of migrant workers, Uttar Pradesh's state.
Also, I remember during the exodus, when all the migrant workers took the streets and highways and were walking home, whatever, there was this flicker of hope in Indian journalism as well, because the spotlight was on the workers. For once, we were talking about the have-nots of the country. There were reporters who were on the highways, they were tracking their journeys or whatever. And I remember interviewing Ajivika Bureau, which works for migrant workers, interviewing Rajiv Khandelwal about a month after the exodus had begun or something. And he said that the workers have already slipped from the radar of public consciousness. They are no longer there, which also brings me to the point that you were making about the lakhs and lakhs of such people. You've put the figure of 100 million in the NYT essay because the data is largely debated on migrant workers because India does not have a...
We don't have a precise. I mean, I found the numbers. This is an approximation.
So this is a vast community of people, but it is invisible. And then comes an essay like yours, which puts the spotlight on them. Here's an essay that kind of told a human story about the workers and took the big picture as to who they are, what are their challenges, and the structural challenges that you mentioned. Do you, in your interactions with the families, I was wondering if they have seen value to this interaction with a journalist who came to their doorstep 5 years ago, returned 2 or 3 years later maybe, and now their story is on the big screen. And do they see value in their visibility now, or do they feel it's the same?
No, I don't think they articulate this question in these terms. You know, look, we're journalists. Our framing and our questions are very different from their reality. But yes, unhe khushi that this accident of a reporter lining up there and having a certain conversation and writing in a certain way in a certain place, and the many unexpected things that happened after those interviews and the publishing of this story, I would say they're happy that it helped make their lives better.
Okay, that's good to know, because one of the questions that we as journalists always face, like when we are doing reporting on the ground, when we are meeting people, The one question is that हमें इससे क्या मिलेगा? हम आपसे बात करेंगे. And when you're interviewing a person who's a daily wager or who is taking out time, even if it's half an hour,
Right.
it's eating into their work time.
It's true. And that's a question I've faced many times. But in this particular case, nobody ever asked me, yeah, क्या मिलेगा?
Right.
Because I went soon after the events.
Yeah.
कोई उनके साथ वहां बैठ के कभी कभी आप बजा के सुनते हैं तो उनको लगता है कोई दूर से आया है,
Correct.
हमारी कहानी सुन रहा है.
Correct.
तो शायद हमारी जिंदगी का, हमारे गम का कुछ बेहतर है.
Right.
And what we went through counts because somebody, a stranger, is making an effort to come all the way to talk to us and is not just thrusting a mic in our face.
That's right.
But actually just sits down there. It's a silent exercise, but it's an exercise in empathy, and because you want to be there and hear their story. And I think people can tell. And उसमें उन्हें थोड़ा वो लगता है कि भाई कोई हमारा दुख सुन रहा है. That's what we can do. Yes, not every instance of where you go out reporting and you tell a story does something change, or are you able to kind of repay for their time in some way. Miracles, minor miracles happen at times, but not always.
No, not always. Yeah. They often believe that possibly it's being recorded, their voice, their name is being recorded, and possibly the government will take notice. Something will happen for the village. Something will happen.
Well, there is that expectation, and it's a fundamental expectation that a government is elected to serve the population.
Right.
But that doesn't happen most of the time. It's still the fundamental social contract.
Right.
भाई हमने आपको वोट दिया है, सरकार चुनी है, आपको हमारे लिए कुछ काम तो करना हो.
Correct.
That's what the state is supposed to do.
That's right.
Has many other things, but उम्मीद तो रहती कि शायद कोई कहीं पढ़े, कोई अफसर पढ़ ले. हम भी उसी उम्मीद पे लिखते हैं.
बिल्कुल.
कि सरकार में कोई बड़ा अफसर पढ़ ले, शायद उन्हें लगे कि यार कुछ करो. 2 सेंटीमीटर में कभी फर्क हो जाए तो बहुत.
Correct.
I don't expect any writing to bring about radical change. वो बचपन में लगता था जब 20-22 साल के रिपोर्टर थे, अब उम्र हो गई. कहीं पे कुछ हल्का सा भी हो जाए, that's enough.
That's enough.
I just hope for that.
Yeah. I was also thinking that in your interactions with, while you were writing this, or in your engagement before the making of the film or after, or during, did any kind of things stay with you which have not made it to print, which have not made it to the cinema? Like there are some quotes that remain very close to our heart. They remain in our minds, in our notebooks. Was there anything that struck you about how the families you met, how they see life after their child was gone? Was there anything that struck you as personal learning as well?
Of course, there's always personal learning. One of the great things about journalism is that the moment you travel to a small village, पहले तो आपकी जिंदगी में जो भी परेशानियां हैं, शिकवे हैं जिंदगी से कि भाई मेरे पास ये नहीं है, ये ठीक नहीं जा रहा है, आप वहां जाते हैं तो देखते हैं कि मैं कितना खुशकिस्मत इंसान हूँ कि मेरे पास इतना घर है. So, look, that's one of the biggest learnings. It's like journalism teaches you to be grateful for the life you have. I mean, we are extremely privileged to be able to do this work. It's the greatest job in the world. Nothing makes me happier. So it reminds you time and again, every day you do this work, you just realize how fortunate you are to do this. But in this particular case, one thing that that was not immediately when I went there for the first time. I wrote most of all of it actually because मैं खुद ही editor था, तो कोई काटने वाला था नहीं मेरी कहानी. But I think the fact that, because life is so hard, the luxury of just agonizing and hand wringing doesn't exist in a context like that. And Saiyub, he was in the village for a little bit, and then he did 5 different jobs across India. Once वो ट्रक चलाता था, बॉम्बे में गया काम करने, kept trying one job after another And then he always had his eye on कि यार दुबई में कुछ काम मिले तो काम मुश्किल है, धूप बहुत तेज है, जो लस्ती रेत में काम करना है, थोड़े पैसे मिल जाते, अपने परिवार का अपना ध्यान रख सकते, तो वो फिर दुबई चला गया। बट पहले उसने लॉन्ग डिस्टेंस ट्रक ड्राइविंग की, मुंबई में दुकान में काम किया और पीछे इवेंचुअली उसका वीजा पासपोर्ट हो गया, दुबई में नौकरी मिल गई, so he's been in Dubai. What he taught me is that you just can't stop. There are setbacks, there are difficulties, but there's no luxury. I mean, some people have the luxury to just agonize and wring their hands and miserable about themselves, but majority of the world doesn't have that. You just have to keep going.
जैसे जो आप एक इमेज है इस फिल्म में भी, the first scene of these hundreds of boys and girls trapped in a train station to appear for an exam.
बिना मैच के लिए स्टेडियम छोड़ के भागोगे? स्टेडियम भर के अभ्यर्थी नहीं दिख रहे तुमको? कोई चांस नहीं है, हम आरआरबी का एग्जाम दे देंगे। तो वहाँ भी उतनी मारामारी होगी। बेकार ही भर दिया यार तुम हमारा फार्म। तो क्या करना है, ईंट पत्थर उठाने? आओ यार।
Are you personally moved, Basharat, by the angst of the country's youth?
That opening image जो एक भीड़ है लड़कों की, रेलवे स्टेशन क्रॉस करते हैं, भागे जा रहे हैं, एक नौकरी थी, नौकरी नहीं मिल रही, उसके लिए अप्लाई कर। अगर आप देखें कि वो जो नौकरी है, I mean, it's not the greatest job in the world, but the desperation among young, rural or working class or lower middle class youth for a job like that, that is also tied to the absence of opportunities, is also tied to quality of our schools and colleges. आप मुझे बताएं, 5-6 universities हैं इंडिया में which are like pretty good quality, and now there's a lot of money into these private universities. Some of them are quite good, but मैं एक public university में पढ़ा हूँ, अलीगढ़ में, उत्तर प्रदेश में। मैं देखता था वहाँ आसपास, I mean, we were very lucky, we had a great library, बहुत बड़ी लाइब्रेरी थी, रात के 2 बजे तक खुली रहती थी, आप कोई भी किताब पढ़ सकते, वो पढ़े ना पढ़े आपके हाथ में, मतलब बेसिक इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर था आपके पास। बट ओवरऑल जो यूनिवर्सिटीज की हालत है इंडिया में, और यूनिवर्सिटीज छोड़ के जो कॉलेजेस की हालत, आप यूपी, बिहार, मध्य प्रदेश आके देख लीजिए। अगर हमारे छोटे गांवों और छोटे शहरों से कोई निकल के कुछ कर पाता अपनी जिंदगी के साथ, तो इट्स अ मिरेकल, बिकॉज स्ट्रक्चरली हम सेंट स्टीफेंस के लड़के से 20 साल पीछे होते हैं जब हम बीए करके निकलते हैं। मैंने एक किताब लिखी थी, पहली किताब कश्मीर पर कर्फ्यूड नाइट, तो जो वो पब्लिशर ने उसकी हैड अ पार्टी, वो एक बड़े अंग्रेजी बोलने वाले मंत्री थे, तो उन्होंने कहा, सो व्हिच ईयर वर यू एट द कॉलेज? उनके दिमाग में किताब लिखने वाला सिर्फ उस कॉलेज से निकल सकता था। सर, आई वाज एट अ कॉलेज, बट दैट इज, वही तो वो रेलवे ट्रैक पार कराता है उस लड़के को डेस्परेशन। इन्वेस्टमेंट उसमें चाहिए आपको, पब्लिक हेल्थ में और एजुकेशन में, छोटे शहर छोटे गांव की लेवल पे इन्वेस्टमेंट चाहिए। वो बहुत सबसे, चांद पे जाने से ज्यादा जरूरी है वो, चांद वांद हो जाए, बट आई थिंक द हॉस्पिटल्स, द schools, the public schools and the colleges, that's where India needs its greatest investment.
Right, no, absolutely. And now after this film's release and everything, your story acquiring its life of its own, and now it going to the Oscars, so I don't think the attention on the film and the story is going to ebb anytime soon. It's just an ongoing thing. Do you think it will be a conversation starter after a 5-year lull on the migrant community? हम लोगों ने जब माइग्रेशन स्टोरी लॉन्च करा तो कई लोगों ने कहा, अच्छा वो कोविड टाइम पे बहुत लोग निकले थे. It almost felt like that they're all around you. That's the community of people serving you in a city. They're driving your cabs, they're cleaning your streets. उनके बगैर चलेगा नहीं, पर आपकी याददाश्त कोविड से जुड़ी हुई है, which also shows that you understand that the migrant workforce is there because you did see them in numbers when they came on the highways. But at the same time, like Mr. Khandelwal had said earlier on, that they've slipped from your consciousness. They're no longer as in this. Yeah. But do you think this film will in a way put the spotlight on this workforce? Will it be a conversation starter?
I can only hope. I have lived in India long enough that I can only hope.
To a point that you earlier made, that on the film doing justice to the story you wrote, I think it actually appeared like an extension of the story. The tone, the tenor of this film.
He made a beautiful film. He made an extraordinary, beautiful film.
An extraordinary.
I'm very, very happy with it.
Thank you for joining us on this. We really, truly appreciate your time to discuss your work and the film with us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Check out our website www.themigrationstory.com for more content. You can subscribe to our podcast on YouTube and Spotify. The audio editing and sound design is by Akshay Ramuhalli. Stay tuned for more stories on migration.
The Migration Story.